So you've submitted the RFP. Now what? You're one of 5 finalists, and the 5 finalists, again, as you mentioned a little while ago, some pretty heavy hitters. So how did you take your proposal to the next level to really distinguish yourself from the other 4? And a question about the other 4, did any of the other 4 really emphasize sustainability to the level that your submission did, or was it all kind of more general and maybe going off in other directions?
As far as we know, and we have seen the drawings and the submissions, but we did not sit in on their interviews. We did hear about them afterwards. Mm-hmm. As far as we know, most of them mentioned it, mm-hmm. but it wasn't part of the design concept.
Okay.
As we were.
Right.
And I think that is what got their attention. I mean, that is, I think, one of the reasons why we won the competition and got this commission. So that is the difference. I've seen the other buildings, and from a design perspective, they're very different. They're completely different looking buildings. All 5 of them were. Mm-hmm. And all, it's hard for, a university president who at the time didn't have a lot of experience getting buildings built to determine which is better visually or which is better architecturally.
Right.
He's a lawyer. And so I think in that committee's mind, the differentiating factor was the promises that we made, mm-hmm. the comments that we made about, and conceptually that this is from its foundation and core a highly sustainable building.
So now you've got to take it to the next level. You sit there, you've kind of talked generally about ventilation and lighting and radiant slab, kind of stuff. Now you're one of the 5 finalists. You got to take it to the next level. How did you go about doing that, and were you confident that you could live up to the expectations that you're starting to set and establish with your client?
Oh, no, I was scared to death. And the reason for that is because even though the promises made were relatively broad and not specific, I also knew and have a lot of experience with state of Maryland funded projects. And at the time, now the state of Maryland mandates LEED Silver. At the time, they did not. There was no promises there. So, in other words, what scared me was our own promises, and knowing that the amount of budget and cost per square foot that this budget was based on, and being able to deliver that kind of high level of sustainability, which does indeed cost a little bit more. Mm-hmm. So no, I was very concerned about that, and that became, even though the end result of this is good, the process getting there was pretty scary, because we also went through a whole series of value engineering, of course. And at one point, initially in schematic design, we had all of these features that I've mentioned before, plus a photovoltaic array on the roof. Mm-hmm. And in most cases, when they got threatened by a stage of value engineering, Mr. Angelos, the donor, was convinced to, in many cases, put in a little bit more money to get this. But when it got to the PV array, I believe, if I remember correctly, the cost was $1.5 million. And when compared to the benefits that it would give, it just was a big difference.
Right.
So we value engineered out the PV array on the building, that was another very scary, nightmarish moment for me. How are we going to then deliver on our own promises without that? But fortunately, we were able to do that.
Well, and before we kind of talk about the client at this point, talk a little bit about Banish. You said you were scared to death, and so how were your consultants, in particular Banish? Were they confident? Were they going in saying yes, we can deliver, and did they kind of bring you along? Because I'm hearing more is not only managing the client's expectations, but I guess managing the expectations of the team itself, which can be quite different. So how did Banish feel at this point about the ability to deliver upon what's being represented?
Banish was beyond confident. Banish assumed that their design that they won this competition was going to get built.
Okay.
So they were extremely confident. They were actually indignant that some of these items appeared on value engineering lists. I was the one that was losing sleep over this, because I knew how difficult it was in the state of Maryland system to get this thing going. The only reason, I think this is a pretty fair statement. The only reason that we were able to actually achieve platinum status was because the donor did kick in some additional money to do that, to achieve those energy. Without that, if we had to live within the way the state of Maryland did their projects at the time, I doubt if we would have been able to get to platinum.
Platinum status.
Yeah.
So, and at this point, I guess the client's expectation and the commitment and interest in sustainability is becoming more and more and more as you're, starting to get into the details and they start to see the benefits and so forth and so on. At this point, were you talking numbers with them, or were they still confident that, what they had established in the RFP is that the budget was something that was still achievable, given all that they were kind of focusing on?
Well, again, we avoided the discussion of any certain lead level.
Mm-hmm.
And the discussion was simply highly sustainable. And the client was very much so committed to that highly sustainable project without the definition of lead. Now, we would have met their needs. We would have satisfied them on this project,
right,
even if we had never submitted to lead, right, on this project when they get their energy bills monthly, for one thing.
Right.
And which has been pretty amazing, frankly. But no, the client's commitment helped tremendously. The client, at times, the university, the donor through the university's president, intervened in some of these value engineering sessions where the university state system was seeing that we were over budget and needed to bring it down to budget, and all kinds of things were on the list, and would have been deleted from the project had it not been for the intervention of the client. So we were lucky that we had that behind us. Without that, I don't think we would have gotten there.
And I think part of that, that commitment from the client probably came from you not over-promising. You being very realistic, not promising the universe and all these other. So it was the expectation that the client very early on can wrap themselves around and felt manageable, as opposed to just, as so many clients, as so many architects and engineers do in their zealousness to please their client and saying a lot of things that they think they want their client to hear to make them happy. A lot of times I've heard people say the client just want a realistic picture and to talk to them about what things really are, the reality. And that allows them to really grasp onto something as opposed to, I'm going to take you to the moon, which everybody wants to go, or some of us do.
Yeah, and the other thing I think that helped is that the client had no idea what we were talking about.
So it was an educational opportunity for you to educate them about what is sustainability and the various levels of sustainability. So again, it comes back to that communication thing of really talking to your client and educating them is a great way of managing the expectations of that client going forward.